The morning in Bath was alive with excitement. The bells of St. Mark's Church tolled proudly as Clara Whitmore adjusted her veil in the mirror. She was the picture of grace, her ivory gown falling delicately to the floor, her smile touched by nervous anticipation. Today was meant to be perfect. She was marrying Michael Harrington, the man who had promised her love and devotion. But the perfection shattered before the vows were even spoken. As Clara's car pulled up to the churchyard, another vehicle swerved violently and struck it from the side. Glass scattered across the cobbled street, guests shrieked, and Clara clutched her dress in shock. From the other car stepped a woman with striking auburn hair and a smirk carved on her lips. Annabel Frost. She was no stranger to Michael's past. Whispers of her had always floated around, but Clara had never imagined she would appear here, at this very hour. Terribly sorry, Annabel drawled, her voice laced with mockery. Such a shame to spoil your day, Clara. But you see, Michael was always mine first. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Clara froze, her heart pounding as she turned towards Michael. Instead of fury or indignation, his face bore something worse, a flicker of guilt, hidden behind an awkward smile. The wedding bells continued to ring, but their music now felt like an echo of mockery. Clara realized, with a sickening weight, that the day she had dreamt of was no longer hers. It was being stolen before her very eyes. And then, as the guests watched in stunned silence, Annabel leaned closer to Michael, whispering something that made his expression tighten. Clara could not hear the words, but she saw enough to know this was no accident. The church doors remained open. The vows would not be spoken. Not today. The car crash had silenced the bells of St. Mark's before they could summon joy. Guests dispersed uneasily, whispering behind gloved hands, while Clara returned to her family's townhouse in Bath without a husband at her side. Her gown, once radiant, now felt heavy and mocking against her skin. She locked herself in her chamber, staring at the mirror as the veil slipped from her hair. The reflection that stared back was pale and trembling, her lips pressed tight to hold back the sobs. Outside, the murmurs of gossip floated through the windows, rumors of Michael, rumors of Annabel, rumors of money. Always money. Hours later, footsteps echoed in the corridor. The door creaked open and Michael stepped inside. His once proud shoulders slouched under the weight of unspoken truths. He attempted a smile, but his eyes betrayed unease. Clara, he said softly, Annabel did not mean to ruin everything. The accident was unfortunate. She has her troubles, you see. It would be cruel to hold it against her. Clara's breath caught. Her husband-to-be was defending the very woman who had shattered their vows before they were made. The room chilled with the weight of betrayal. You call this an accident? Clara's voice quivered, though she fought to keep it steady. She stood in front of our guests and claimed you as hers. And you say I should forgive? Michael shifted, his gaze darting to the carpet. It is not so simple. Annabel is desperate. Insurance claims, debts, she cannot manage alone. I only meant to help her. Clara felt the heat of anger rise, mingling with disbelief. Her wedding had dissolved into scandal, and now the man who should have defended her stood pleading for his former lover. From the street below came the faint sound of carriage wheels. Clara glanced through the window just as Annabel stepped onto the pavement, her auburn hair catching the lantern light. She was smiling at their house as though it belonged to her. And Clara realized with a shudder that Annabel was not leaving Bath. She was settling in. Weeks passed, but the wound of the broken wedding never healed. Clara agreed reluctantly to travel with Michael to their townhouse in London, a stately Georgian home on a quiet square. She thought distance from Bath might grant her peace. Yet peace did not arrive. For Clara quickly discovered that shadows had followed her. Michael spent long evenings away, offering excuses of business dinners and pressing affairs. One night, unable to sleep, Clara descended the staircase only to hear muffled laughter from the drawing room. The door was ajar. She pushed it open and her heart turned to ice. There, on the velvet sofa, sat Annabel Frost. Her auburn hair glimmered in the firelight, her hand resting far too comfortably on Michael's arm. "Clara, darling," Annabel cooed, as though she were hostess and not intruder. "How charming of you to join us. You see, this house may be yours, but Michael belongs to me." The words sliced through the room. Michael rose, flustered, his glass of brandy sloshing. "Clara, it is not what it seems." "Not what it seems?" Clara's voice rang sharper than she intended. Her gaze fell on the deed to the house, left carelessly upon the desk. Her father had transferred it into her name as a gift. The house was legally hers, though Michael had spoken of it to Annabel as though it were his prize to share. Annabel's smile deepened. "You cannot keep both, Clara. Either the house or the man. Which shall it be?" Clara's pulse thundered. The audacity of the woman, the betrayal of the man she had once loved, the weight of humiliation before her very eyes, it was too much to bear. She reached for the deed, clutching it tightly as though it were her armor. Michael stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Please, Clara. Do not make this harder. Annabel and we cannot help ourselves." And in that instant, Clara understood. The vows had died long before the wedding bells were silenced. Yet Annabel was wrong if she believed Clara would surrender what was rightfully hers. Clara lifted her chin, her hand firm upon the deed. "This house stays with me." But even as she spoke, she noticed Annabel's other hand sliding something across the desk, a folded letter sealed in Michael's handwriting. Clara did not yet know its contents, but the look in Annabel's eyes promised it would change everything. Clara's fingers trembled as she reached for the folded letter. The wax seal bore Michael's initials, the strokes firm and familiar. She felt the weight of Annabel's gaze upon her, daring her to break it open. Michael snatched the letter from the desk before she could. "That is private," he said quickly, his tone uneven. "It has nothing to do with you." "Nothing to do with me?" Clara's voice was sharp. "I am your wife. Every word you write matters." Annabel laughed softly, her voice like silk concealing thorns. "Oh, let her read it, Michael. She deserves to know how you truly speak of her." The air thickened as Michael hesitated, his knuckles white around the paper. But Clara's determination burned brighter than his excuses. With a swift movement, she tore it from his hand. Her eyes scanned the words, and with each line her chest tightened. The letter was written to Annabel, filled with cruel confessions. Michael had called Clara wealthy but simple, a convenient match who could never suspect his true affections. He promised Annabel that once the house was secured, they would have their freedom. Clara lowered the letter slowly, her face drained of color yet ablaze with fury. "So this is what I am to you," she whispered. "A purse of gold. A fool to be mocked." Michael reached for her, but she stepped back. Annabel watched with delight, her smile triumphant. "You see, Clara," Annabel purred, "he never belonged to you. Not his heart, not his words. You are nothing more than his benefactress." The clock on the mantelpiece ticked heavily, marking the silence that followed. Clara held the letter to her chest, her pulse steadying. She felt the sting of betrayal, but also the spark of resolve. At last she met Annabel's eyes. "You may have his promises. But I have something far stronger. I have the law on my side. This house is mine, and no letter will change that." Annabel's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The house may be yours, Clara. But soon enough, Michael's child will be mine. And that is a claim you cannot erase." Clara's grip tightened on the letter as the room seemed to sway. Annabel's words were a blade sharper than any lie, and their edge cut deep. The revelation left Clara sleepless for nights. She roamed the silent halls of the London townhouse, the letter hidden beneath her pillow like a burning coal. Annabel's words echoed without mercy. Michael's child would be hers. Clara's father had taught her that despair was weakness, but cunning was strength. And so, instead of collapsing, she wrote a letter of her own. Not to Michael, nor to Annabel, but to the one woman whose authority Michael had never defied, his mother, Lady Harrington. Lady Harrington arrived unannounced one grey afternoon. Her carriage drew stairs as it rolled into the square, the Harrington crest shining proudly. She entered the drawing room with the authority of an empress, her presence commanding silence. "Clara," she said, her voice clipped yet not unkind, "your letter disturbed me. I had to see for myself." Michael followed shortly after, visibly unsettled at the sight of his mother. Annabel appeared minutes later, cheeks flushed, her hand resting conspicuously upon her belly. Lady Harrington's sharp eyes missed nothing. She studied Annabel coolly, then turned to her son. "Michael, explain this farce. Why do I hear whispers of betrayal? Why is this woman seated as though she belongs here?" Michael faltered, stammering excuses about compassion, about debts, about promises he had never meant to dishonor. Annabel, however, rose with audacity. "Because he loves me," she declared. "And soon, he will be father to my child." The room froze. Lady Harrington's expression hardened, though her lips curved into something like disdainful amusement. She turned back to Clara, her gloved hand brushing Clara's arm with surprising gentleness. "My dear," she said in a low voice meant only for her, "a Harrington man may disgrace himself, but the name must never fall. This house is yours, use it wisely. If that woman believes she can replace you, she is sorely mistaken." Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and grim resolve. For the first time, she felt not entirely alone. Yet even as she gathered strength from Lady Harrington's words, Annabel leaned against the mantel, her smile defiant. "You think bloodlines and titles can frighten me," she sneered. "This child in me is my weapon, and you cannot erase it with your fine words or papers. Michael will choose me, because he already has." And when Michael dropped his gaze, shame burning across his face, Clara knew the storm had only just begun. The townhouse in Mayfair grew heavier with silence after Lady Harrington's visit. Clara spent her days in the library, searching through papers her father had once left her, hoping to find some weapon against Annabel's growing influence. One evening, as the rain lashed against the tall windows, Clara's candle flickered and revealed something unusual. The corner of the rug near the hearth seemed slightly raised. Kneeling, she tugged at it and discovered loose floorboards beneath. Her hands trembled as she pried them open. Hidden in the hollow space lay a bundle of old letters tied with a black ribbon. The handwriting was unmistakable, Michael's. With dread, she began to read. They were love letters, each one addressed to Annabel Frost. Promises of escape. Declarations that he would one day free himself from obligations and marry her instead. Clara's throat tightened as she realized these were not relics of the distant past. The latest letter was dated scarcely a fortnight ago, written during their engagement. Her heart pounded with fury, yet a strange clarity overtook her. Annabel's confidence was not mere bravado, she had proof, tangible words inked by Michael's own hand. Clara folded the letters carefully, pressing them to her chest. At that very moment, footsteps echoed in the corridor. The door creaked open, and Michael appeared, his face pale from the storm outside. His eyes fell upon the letters in Clara's grasp. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then his voice, low and strained, cut through the air. "You were never meant to see those." Clara rose slowly, her anger burning steadier than the candlelight. "And yet I have. Tell me, Michael, how long have you plotted against me in my own house?" Michael stepped forward, but before he could answer, another sound intruded, the faint laugh of a woman drifting from the stairwell. Annabel's voice, sweet and cruel, curling through the shadows. "Careful, Clara," she called. Secrets are dangerous things. Sometimes they bury the wrong person. Clara held her ground, the bundle of letters pressed tightly against her chest. The rain outside battered the windows like an angry drum, and the flickering candlelight carved cruel shadows across Michael's face. Annabel entered the library as though it belonged to her, her auburn hair gleaming, her smile sharp. She trailed her hand along the spines of the books as if she were choosing a story for her amusement. "You see," she said softly, "Michael's heart has always belonged to me. You were merely the ornament, Clara, the name, the fortune, the convenience. But soon, you will be nothing." Michael flinched at her words, but he did not contradict them. Instead, he lowered himself into the chair by the fire, burying his face in his hands. Clara stared at him, her fury cooling into something colder than grief, a resolve sharpened by betrayal. "Do you imagine," Clara said steadily, "that I shall simply step aside? That I will watch as you parade through my home, bearing the title that rightfully belongs to me?" Annabel's smile widened. "You will not have a choice. Once this child is born, the Harrington line will depend upon me. And Michael knows it." The weight of the words pressed down on the room. Clara's hand tightened around the letters. They were proof enough to ruin Michael, to stain his name beyond repair. But even as she thought it, Annabel's eyes glittered with knowledge, as if she had her own weapon hidden away. The tension broke when Lady Harrington's voice cut through the hall, sharp as steel. "Enough." She entered the room with the authority of judgment itself, her gaze falling first on Michael, then on Annabel, and finally on Clara. "You disgrace this house with your games," she said coldly. "Michael, you shame the Harrington name. And you, Miss Frost, do not mistake my silence for weakness. If you think a child gives you power, you know nothing of war." Clara felt her breath catch. For all Lady Harrington's strength, there was something in Annabel's laugh that unsettled her. It was not the laugh of a woman afraid. It was the laugh of someone who had already placed her pieces on the board. And as thunder cracked above the townhouse, Clara realized the game was spiraling beyond her control. The storm did not relent. It raged over London as though the heavens themselves wished to witness the downfall of the Harringtons. Within the library, 3 women and 1 broken man stood poised at the edge of ruin. Lady Harrington's presence filled the room, her fury masked by icy restraint. Clara held the incriminating letters in her hands, her pulse steady now, sharpened by the clarity of survival. Michael slumped in his chair, while Annabel stood tall, her eyes burning with triumph. "I tire of this," Lady Harrington declared. "Michael, you will renounce this farce at once." But Michael's voice was hoarse with defeat. "It is too late, Mother. The letters prove everything. My name is already soiled." Annabel stepped forward, one hand upon her swelling belly. "Not soiled. Redeemed. When this child is born, it will be the rightful heir. Clara will fade into memory, and I will take my place." Clara's grip on the letters tightened. She had the power to destroy him utterly, yet her instincts told her Annabel was holding something darker still. She studied the smug curve of her rival's lips and understood, there was another truth hidden beneath this cruel theater. "Why such confidence, Annabel?" Clara asked softly. "Why laugh when all I need do is expose these words to the world?" Annabel's smile deepened. "Because the world loves a scandal, Clara. And I have kept something far more damning than your fiancé's lies." From her cloak, she drew a folded document. Lady Harrington's face drained of color at the sight of it. Clara, bewildered, caught the fear in her mother-in-law's eyes. "This," Annabel said, waving the paper with relish, "is proof of debts your dear husband left unpaid. Fraud, embezzlement, shame enough to crush your family forever. Michael is not the only Harrington who can be ruined." The air grew heavy, silence stretching as thunder rolled outside. Clara felt her world tilting, the letters in her hand suddenly small against the weapon Annabel held. Lady Harrington's lips parted, her voice colder than stone. "You wicked girl, how dare you?" But Annabel only laughed, the sound slicing through the storm. And in that instant, Clara realized the battle had shifted. It was no longer only about love, nor betrayal. It was about the survival of the Harrington name itself. And as the candle guttered and the storm raged on, Clara knew the final move had yet to be played.